the term mural art makes the whole problem by itself, because actually the mural art is coming out of graffiti. And graffiti was a no-go. It was a critic against the establishment. It was forbidden. You can go into prison. You must hide. You have to challenge your life, your safety first of all, and you won't expose yourself as an artist. You are seen by your graffiti, but nobody knows how you look like. Now, to make it political correct, suddenly the graffiti, which is an against establishment movement, is becoming political correct, because now the politician found out, okay, if we accept it as part of our culture, everybody can do it. So the force, the power against the revolutionary action is, so to say, suddenly peacefully accepted. The public can enjoy, and the critics is gone. And now everybody is decorating his walls and murals outside every city, every town, everywhere, with some murals, some colors, and I don't know why. Because there's no message anymore. The graffiti was there for a message and for a meaning, and now it's becoming a wall decoration design, that's all. So therefore I'm a little bit skeptical, because if once art becomes, modified, if the first impact, the first impulse, the motivation of an artwork will change because it will be used as a medium, as a tool for something else, whatever it is, then the message or the art is not anymore the same. So if we talk about mural art, we have to make a line between graffiti and mural art, and then there are two kinds of wall art, let's say. Regarding Penang, I was actually surprised, because 2006, when I came here, there was no mural art at all. When I came back to 13, I realized, oh, mural art, oh, there's something on the wall. And who has done this work? Oh, what was the name? Ernest, I cannot remember, Zakharovich or something. What? Where does he come from? Is he a Penangite? And then I was really...
Now he is.
Now he, yeah. But I was really surprised that a non-Penangite can expose his artwork on such public space. And I was questioning myself, 2013, and where are the Penang artists? Why don't they do it? So, and I think it's now spreading over. Ipoh is now copying Penang, and some Taiping maybe copy Ipoh in a while. And KL starts to make street art as well and mural art. So it's now a kind of addiction that every city, even in Berlin, whatever, this whole thing is a worldwide trend. But that doesn't mean it's part of the art society, sure, but it will maybe last for a few years, then it will be slowed down.
I'd like to say a few things about that.
Sure.
Ernest Zakharovich, Lithuanian, now a Penangite. He's married in Malaysian. Malaysia is an entry-port. We have always has import. Chua Thiên Ting is import. Corsia is an import. Ernest Zakharovich is an import. All right, in our lifetime. So I accept him as a Penang artist. With the proliferation, with him making mural art so popular in Penang, become something that the establishment wants to embrace and keep and protect, right? Which is against the whole idea about graffiti. During that period, there was one graffiti, a true graffiti that came out, showing, painting Ernest, right? Painted Ernest drawing on a wall, and he was writing down Penang Darul Ernest. All right, for foreigners, Darul in Malaysia, in Malay of the Malay states, Sultan is like Kedah Darul Aman. All right, Perak Darul something. So this graffiti artist painted Ernest, Penang Darul Ernest, because it's all about Ernest. It's so, mural art was so sought after and welcome, and because of Ernest. That graffiti was whitewashed overnight by the local council. All right. Soon after that, Georgetown World Heritage Incorporated, GTWHI, the government formed corporation to take care, to look after the World Heritage Site of Georgetown. They approached me. They say that we want to control this proliferation of wall art, mural art. And they want me to lead a committee. Immediately I told them, no, you cannot control art. As soon as you control art, then it takes away a lot from the art. And I told them, just a few months back, Lim Guan Eng, the then chief minister, when he opened the Batik Painting Museum on Armenian Street, I was at the opening. He was the VIP opening the show. And he said something fantastic that I always quoted. He said that art without freedom is propaganda. Oh, art without freedom is propaganda. And I immediately went back and Googled art without freedom is propaganda, whether he quoted from someone or he got it from where, but still today I cannot find the original quote. I say, hey, that may be an original quote from Lim Guan Eng. And I threw that back to GTWHI. Lim Guan Eng just say art without freedom is propaganda. How can you be controlling street art? But they went ahead and set up the committee without my involvement. All right, so it's some background story.
So if I could just put in my 2 cents on that. So I actually interviewed the artist who did that mural. And the funny thing about it was maybe what Doris was saying, they do quite a few public artworks. They've done a lot in KL. Actually, the collective Rumour Studio is made from artists based in KL. And they all came up quite early on in 2011, 2012. And they are locally, Malaysians, but sort of locally trained artists. So they've actually learnt their art from mentors rather than doing it at university. And they class themselves as graffiti artists, not mural artists. So that was meant to be graffiti. I mean, that had a message. And the message was not particularly strong, I don't think. Okay, maybe locally it's a bit sensitive. But their biggest, after the furor around it, their biggest worry was that actually Ernest would get in trouble. Because a lot of people thought it was Ernest who did it himself, which is, I suppose, quite funny. I mean, it talks about the artist's ego, I suppose. But so the whole point was that was graffiti. People have tried to do graffiti in Penang, graffiti in its absolute sense. But as Lee Khai said, I mean, after the control, it has become very heritage-based, which is maybe making it a bit more unique in terms of the aesthetic. But puts a cap on what's being done.
But to be fair to Ernest, he is also a graffiti artist. He did that Lego mural in Johor, which was whitewashed a short while after.
So there's a lot of talk about how the street art has framed art in Penang, basically, in the recent years, and a lot of focus on international artists coming in and some local artists too painting the walls. As a local artist yourself, Fan Chon, and in the recent years that you've built the collective and actually opened up a gallery as well at Hinbus, how did you find that? How do you maneuver around this hype or trend that has that has suddenly appeared? How do you navigate around that? And as a local artist, what are some of your thoughts on what the other panelists have shared regarding this?
So your question first, I wanted to respond to what's been said so far, because there's a lot talked about mural and graffiti, and also the art boom in Georgetown, being one of the cities in Southeast Asia, is not uniquely Penang, is happening regionally. And what I observed so far I think I'm more interested in terms of how art has been experienced in Georgetown in general. I mean, the fact that in Malaysia we don't have a dedicated Ministry of Culture. We have a Ministry of Tourism and Culture. So it's quite interesting when this is put together. So art is used as a way to generate, not to say money, to drive the economy. So it's intentionally put together. And how it's been adopted on the street level by the public, what we see, I think maybe Ernest started something interesting. Because also, geographically, Georgetown being a walking town, how we experience the city is very different. You walk around, it's not like Kuala Lumpur where you have to drive to one place and you only spend time at that one place. In Georgetown, so where public and private space become quite blur, and when arts, start to go out from gallery to the public space, it's become a very different way to experience the city. And also mural or graffiti, yeah, we need to talk about that. It's quite new in Georgetown when we talk about mural art, less than 10 years maybe. It's not quite something for scholar or researcher to pick it up, to really look into that yet. But also the proliferation of museums in Georgetown is quite crazy, I think, and how relaxed, I think, for private enterprises to use the word museum. In Europe, when we talk about museum, we've got to be so serious about it. You need researcher, you need curator. But museum in Georgetown, we got all sorts of museums. So that kind of relaxedness towards running a museum, branding anything art, is it good or bad? I mean, I leave it to you, but it is definitely a phenomenon. In Georgetown, we got Ghost Museum, we got Wonder Food Museum, we got Upside Down Museum. Chocolate Museum. So
Teddy Museum.
Yes, so I think it is definitely a phenomenon. I mean, and that sort of relaxedness in Penang and Georgetown, I think it is a good thing. At the same time, it's also a problem for people who dedicate all their time to understand the visual language, to take it really seriously, to really want to say something. But at the same time, maybe for my sister, my family, they would go to a Ghost Museum rather than going to a gallery. So how do we say which is good or not? I'm just want to make a point that I think art is experienced in a very different way in Georgetown. Is it good or bad? I'm not too sure.
How many here say it's good? And how many here say it's bad? There's actually an act of parliament and a bill stage being, but it has not been put to parliament yet, drafted to try to control what is a museum, who can call himself a museum.
I mean, we've got people fighting over we have people fighting over the label of curator, already in Georgetown slowly, but museum, so anything can be a museum. So in a way, the idea, conception of museum is a Western invention. Why would anyone want to put everything inside a building and then admire them in a different way? Why can't we admire at different ghosts and food? So in a way, it's good. I think, me personally, I like those museums.
Actually, museum, I have no problems if you have museum for everything, right? But museum means in the Western world, and maybe this is the difference, that you learn more and you keep it for the future. Therefore, you put it in a building, you keep it, you archive it, you document it, and to make it safe that the future generation can learn out of it and they can connect to their roots. And this is especially what I'm missing here. And I want to share my opinion because about the roots of art in Malaysia, what you just told us, the art history, and I don't believe it because it's a special perception. Because African art, which we call now African art, the African masks, all this kind of stuff, was in the beginning of the century, 1900 something, discovered suddenly as art form and accepted. And before that, they don't say the Western world, and this is really bad, the Western world is taking a step higher to judge something on first place, and then to revise it and say, oh, now suddenly we accepted it as art. So if you have the Sarawakian wood carving and all your traditional, really skillful works, the masks, whatever, this is already, for me, as an art historian, I must say, considered art. You have cave paintings in nearby Ipoh. I mean, this is considered art. So the art is starting much earlier than it's in the textbook, so to say.
That's why
and this is a little bit what is my concern, because there's such a huge gap, and nobody is connecting to this foundation which is already there.
I'm doing something about it. That's why I qualified myself from the very beginning. We are talking about the Western art tradition, all right, or the Western visual art tradition. We have actually a superb Nusantara collection in Penang of tribal art. Tribal art informed people like Picasso, and they were hugely influenced by tribal art, by African and Japanese and Oriental art forms. Now, I'm working, Mr. David Gore, the founder of Entopia and Artopia, has a superb collection of tribal artwork. He went around the Nusantara, Southeast Asia, for 20, 30 years, and he amassed, these are not wood carvings, a lot of wood carvings. They were not made as work of art. It's part of their life. And many of them are religious in nature and tribal totems and stuff. And he's got a huge collection, and I sort of working with him, getting it documented, getting them digitized. He agreed to eventually give a substantial portion to the State Art Gallery. I wanted it to be the State Art Gallery, not with the museum, because I wanted that interaction between art and this tribal art form, which are so rich, so interesting, and we need a lot of help with that. So yes, we are working on such things. I truly see them connected and as an art form. It's just that we are just talking about the visual art of the West.
I'd like to go back to the earlier question that I asked Fan Chon. I don't mean to put you on the spot to speak on behalf of the local artist community, but in terms of navigating this boom in mural arts, and also there's a lot of conversation about how culture and heritage plays into the contemporary art and whether or not that relationship is there. Can you share your thoughts on that, on these two things, particularly mural art and also connecting with the local art, the culture and traditions for the contemporary young artists in Penang? I mean, like how do the young contemporary artist group kind of navigate with these two different influences, if at all they are connected to them or not?
Before Fan Chon think about his answer, what I was very fascinated with is that art must appeal to the locals, to the community. And I saw that when one day I was having coffee in a coffee shop in the morning, in a very local coffee shop. These are all locals. And I started hearing the locals, the usual customers, the regulars at the coffee shop, talking about certain thing in their life. They talk aloud in Hokkien. And you know what? They were talking about a certain place in town, in the neighborhood, and they were using the mural, Ernest's mural, as their reference point. And I said, wow, it is very much accepted as part of the community now. Right? It's fantastic.
So the question was about how the young practitioner, or practitioner in general in Penang, how do they navigate between heritage and contemporary art practice? Mural heritage. I think it depends on the artists themselves. It's not. I mean, some of the artists, they are not originally. I think actually most of the artists I know, they are not originated from Penang. They just choose Penang to be their base, maybe more affordable rent, and is a lot more communal, and is a lot easier to mobilize things, to make things happen, to run events and all that. So whether they are interested or whether they always will work with mural or not, I think it's up to individual. So, and if it's in them already or not, most of the mural artists I know, they have a background in graffiti. And some of them were in Kuala Lumpur. They were doing quite a lot more graffiti. And then they realized in Georgetown is almost, you could do it anywhere. It's not illegal anymore. So it's not so exciting for them so much to do graffiti when everyone expected you to do a graffiti. Do you know what I mean? So, but some of them still manage to make money out of that. It becomes commissioned, sanctioned graffiti, if there is a word for that. So for artists or not to respond, I think artists don't necessarily respond to them being in Penang, being the second city, not being in the capital. But the advantage for artists, I think, because the talent pool here, correct me if I'm wrong, I think compared to Kuala Lumpur, we have less artists in Penang compared to Kuala Lumpur. And we only have one university that teach art, which is USM, and then we have a few colleges that they don't all have a dedicated fine art course. I mean, the amount of artists we can produce every year is actually not that many compared to Kuala Lumpur. But being in the second city, I think give the artists in Penang a bit of an advantage, because if you work, I think, really hard, it's easier for you to be seen, because the pool here is smaller. And sometimes when a curator approaches artists to make an exhibition, they tend to want to work with artists that is not from the capital, in order to give a more, I don't know, paint a bigger picture about the Malaysian art scene. So it is an advantage. Even when it comes to International Cultural Agency, they do now, because they want to be politically correct, I suppose, they will look for artists outside of Kuala Lumpur, not just focus in one city. So I think that is an advantage for being in Penang.
Thanks, Fan Chon. So there's also currently a lot of talks about creating creative and cultural hubs around the world. This term creative industry is now the new buzzword that lots of governments talk about, and they talk about creating policies and blueprints to capture the creatives that don't fall within the conventional industries. And that has somehow been caught on in Malaysia and also in Penang. So Penang has a plan to turn into a regional creative hub, a place where creatives and artists from all over will congregate here and exchange knowledge, talent, and whatnot. So this question is across the board. Like, what are your views on that, in making Penang a creative hub, and are we ready yet? What are some of the things you think that are strengths, or what are some of the gaps that we could fill before we call ourselves, or even have a plan to be a creative hub? Would you like to start and share your thoughts, James?